Welcome to another episode of Workforce Wednesday. I'm with my good friend Brett Landrum, the CEO of Procare HR, and we've got a really great topic to talk about. I just first want to say is I'm so glad you're here, that you're part of the community, that you're watching. We really expect, and you should expect out of this, to learn some takeaways, to learn some things that'll make your business, your senior living business, better. And of course, we want you to subscribe to all the good stuff we do, because we're all about making the lives of people who live and work in senior living. So we're going to jump into our conversation right after this. First off, what do you think of the new intro? That's the first time we've used it.
Love it. It's great.
Okay, so we were, let's actually I want to do 30 seconds on who you are and who Procare HR is first before we jump in the conversation.
Absolutely. So, Procare, I always like to talk about the vision for our organization, and really the rallying cry behind Procare is, how do we leverage people and people-related functions to really transform, have a transformational impact on the industry? And, our strong belief and conviction is that, incremental improvements and, again, people, and I'd say people-related, ancillary people functions can really have outsized impact on quality of care, financial performance, resident satisfaction, growth and scalability, et cetera. And so, it's not just about how do we drive better HR and people outcomes for the sake of driving better HR and people outcomes. It's, how do they translate to the most important and critical outcomes that, senior care operators are trying to drive. And so, at Procare, the way that we do that is we've got really a three-layered approach. The first layer is comprehensive HR services delivered really consistently and optimized for senior care. We got to do the basics well. We got to get payroll processed accurately. We got to answer employee questions quickly, so that they can focus on delivering care and not on all the other stuff that comes at them being an employee. The second layer for us is building and buying really impactful services and solutions that really don't exist in the market, that again enable us to partner with operators and drive quality care, financial performance, resident satisfaction, and growth and scalability. And then the third layer is data, and how do we wrap everything we do in this industry and all the functions and activities we support and leverage the data available to us and put it in front of our clients and the industry holistically to say, look, like, these are the important levers. And if we pull these levers, if we invest money and resources and energy into these different areas of, people in HR, here's how it translates. And I think, that's really important, so that we're not just talking about, trying stuff for the sake of trying stuff. It's, no, we're going to try, we're going to, do an assessment of what the data tells us. And, this particular pulling this lever, the impact it can have on the outcomes we're desiring. And then we're going to pull that lever, and we're going to measure along the way to see how we're tracking. And is it in fact driving, the outcomes that we're hoping for? So that's really what Procare is.
Great. So there in the last week or so, Wall Street Journal had an article that was titled something like "The Honeymoon is Over," and it talked about how for the first time since 2020 or something like that, unemployment rate has jumped above 4.1% or 4%. And even though it's still historically low, it looks as if there are more jobs out there. And I know one of the stories talked about how new college grads, at least in some markets, are really actually having a hard time finding their first job. And we've been so used to working under this extreme pressure on staffing and senior living. And I'm wondering, are you seeing this as you're working with your clients, that the pressure is decreasing?
It 100%. I mean, we're definitely seeing some relief in the labor market. I think some of it is dictated by geography. So I'd say, urban areas have accelerated a little bit faster than some of the rural geographies that we, support operators in. But across the board, everything, we've seen, I'd say both qualitatively and quantitatively is that, the data is supporting that, that there's, a release of pressure. I don't think it's over. But a lot of operators spent the last few years really changing how they thought about talent acquisition and believing that they needed to build the muscle there, just because of the really perpetual workforce shortage. And so a lot of I think there's been a lot of progress made in the industry around developing that muscle, having an understanding of why it's important, executing to it. And I think a combination of senior living, senior care operators getting better at talent acquisition, along with broad shifts in the labor cycle, is leading to a better working environment for a better labor environment for senior care operators.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've seen that I find really encouraging is that it feels like more operators are spending a lot more time thinking about how to create a great workplace experience, even for their frontline people. And it might mean, certainly we know that pay has gone way up, but more flexibility in terms of how staffing is done, sort of more of an awareness of workloads and external things. Although, I did have an executive director send me an email just a few days ago of a brand new benefit that corporate had cooked up for their people out in the field. That was really no benefit at all. Where I can't say much more about it because it would be really specific what it is. But it was one of those things where you look and you say, I don't know why anybody thought this was a good idea, and of course nobody was signing up for it. So I still see some cluelessness out there, but that's sort of an aside. So this seems like a good thing if the labor market softens, but I also worry that there might be some downsides to that. Any thoughts?
Really the risk, as I've reflected on it over the last few months and kind of projecting forward, I mean, Procare has invested heavily in building out a talent acquisition function that really has a differentiated muscle specifically built for frontline workers, our caregivers, our dietary aid, et cetera. And those are obviously really the heartbeat and critical team members in our operations. And I think because of the workforce shortage, it has really highlighted the need both to put our arms wrap our arms around the team members that are providing care, and then secondly, like I mentioned earlier, to build that differentiated muscle around talent acquisition. And how do we get good at it? How do we really drive high volume of applicants, et cetera? And I think a lot of senior care operators have done both those things. They've said, we need to boost retention via really focusing on culture and benefits and different ways to engage and retain our team. And then secondly, we got to be really good at finding and getting potential team members excited about coming on board. And I think the risk of having maybe a relief of pressure on the labor market is we lose focus on those two things. And like the labor market's going to cycle. It always does. It always has. Like, it's going to continue to do that. But I think one of the learnings for the industry is that when we do those things, it has a really positive downstream impact on our organization and the quality of care and resident satisfaction and really delighting and serving seniors. And so if we if the labor market's softening, if we look at that as a if we don't look at that as an opportunity, if we look at that as just, okay, great, I don't have to focus as much, I can shift my focus elsewhere, I think we're going to slide back. And I think we're going to miss the opportunity to really leverage the fact that the labor market is softening and double down on those initiatives to drive better outcomes in our organization.
Yeah, I really like that. I have a philosophy that says that most people, when they take a job, and even when they've been in a job for a while, they actually really want to like their job. They want to do a good job. They want to like their employer, right? And I worry that sometimes the employers don't reciprocate. I think that they've been forced to reciprocate more. But I guess one of the questions that I still struggle with is how do maybe the question is, do we need to change employers' mindset about how they think about people?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one thought, or belief that I hold is I think part of it is data. Like some organizations, inherent in their core values or their mission, et cetera, they're going to be hypersensitive and focused on the employee experience. Other organizations may have a vision or values that you know focus a large portion of their energy elsewhere. And the reason they're focusing more and more energy and resources on employee experience and talent acquisition is because it is a path to driving better outcomes that align with their vision. If labor market softens and the pressure eases, I think there's a temptation to now say we're not going to focus on that because potentially we can get to those outcomes elsewhere. And that's where data comes in, where we need to be able to have the systems and measurements in place to be able to educate the marketplace broadly and say, look, like regardless of the labor, where we're at in the labor cycle, this stuff is really, really important, and it's critical to you achieving the great outcomes that you're driving towards and caring for seniors. And I would say over the last few years, and this is like I think everybody knows this and has talked about it, where every senior care operator has been put in a scenario where they have to accept a warm body. And that is the language that gets used and has been used for a lot of years. But look, if the labor market is easy, pressure is easing, that's an opportunity to raise our talent density in the organization. So Reed Hastings did a book on Netflix, and one of the things that they talked a lot about is really assessing and raising the talent density in the organization. And that's what's our talent score kind of per team member, per employee. And so look, if the labor market is softening, and that means we have more applicants, that's an opportunity to keep a really great talent acquisition muscle and engine going, but then also build a muscle around how do we screen, how do we assess whether these folks are going to raise or lower our talent density. And if we have enough volume, we can do that. And if we raise our talent density, we're going to get better business outcomes, and we're going to and better fulfill the mission and vision for the organization. And so I think and it's that way with some of culture and training and development, et cetera. So my strong urging to senior care operators is and I think you're going to see the labor market continue to ease, and as that happens, let's keep the momentum that we've worked really hard to gain on in these different areas, so that ultimately we can upskill and raise the talent density in the organization to deliver better outcomes, versus saying, great, it's easier to get employees, we don't have to worry about as much, shift focus elsewhere, and kind of our talent density stays the same. It's just easier to get people in.
Yeah, so I think the challenge is, so I was talking to a CEO in the last few days, and we were talking more about the sales effort, but one of the sort of front and center in this whole conversation was that, particularly in the area of assisted living and memory care, where the resident needs are more healthcare almost than they are or maybe as much healthcare as they are social, is that if you have a bad executive director, or bad's maybe not a great term, but somebody who just isn't competent as an executive director, that things can go south really, really, really fast. that in 3 months you can be down 10 or 12 residents, which is just devastating for cash flow. And so I've been thinking a lot about this conversation, and the thing I find myself wondering, and you touch hundreds of companies and thousands of buildings every month, every week. As you sort of see people working with particularly the executive director level, can you fix executive directors who are struggling, or should you just sort of, again, coming back to data, and this sounds a little cruel, look at some and say, these people are just, I need to replace them with a better quality?
It's a large, meaty question.
It is. It's a tough question, right?
I may not answer it directly, but I'll go back to business systems, and installing good business systems, which will lead you to the answer to that question on a individual by individual basis. So, from a business systems perspective, like, I'm a big fan of top grading. And, in top grading, we come up with a job scorecard, which is effectively like a mission statement, really, job score. It's like a job description, mission statement, like it's all rolled into one for a specific role. And so, part of the assessment needs to be like, is this the right executive director for this community at its particular life cycle, point in its life cycle, with the challenges and opportunities that particular community faces. And so that's going to be different. And so there's some of those folks that, are clearly the right fit, and it's how do we develop them and continue to, double down on the things they do great, work on improving their areas of opportunity. For others, it's, hey, we just have the wrong fit. I've got somebody in that's really great at census, but I'm in a particular geography, or I have a Medicaid building where census isn't a problem. Employee morale is a problem. Well, you can have an A player executive director who in one community does a fantastic job because they're really, really good at census. And in the next community, they don't do a great job because it's more about, really efficient operations or, employee engagement and culture, et cetera. And it's not that none of those things, or it's not that all of those things aren't important, but every leader is going to have their strengths and weaknesses. And so it's pairing the unique skills and attributes, strengths, weaknesses of a particular leader with the environment you're putting them in and want them to be successful. So I think that's one of the business systems. The second is, we really subscribe to a talent review process. There's a book called Scaling Up that I think articulates it really nicely. And, in the talent review process, every quarter you're looking at your key seats, and you're deciding, going through a really methodical process to say, how are they performing? How have they performed? Is my confidence up or down? How am I going to develop them? What action am I going to take on, every key person, et cetera? Again, that's a business system that gets you to the answer, what do we do? And then I think just broadly, executive directors are one of the critical challenges for senior care operators, because you have a bunch of CEOs who are running their organization. And again, everyone's different. Everybody's competencies, skill sets, experiences are going to be different, and some will fit, some won't. But I think that is an opportunity for data to say, across a large swath of operators, communities, executive directors, what are the profiles that we tend to see be successful? What are the behavioral profiles? What are the skill sets? And what's the development plans that we can put in place to support some of the folks that maybe are on the fringe of that profile? And then I think the real question is, we do this in our organization. We know for a payroll processor to be really great at what they do and delight clients and be really accurate and proficient, we're pretty dialed in on the behavior, on the psychological profile of that person. And that doesn't mean just because, we have plenty of really successful people that don't fit that profile. But we're cognizant of the profile when we ask interview questions, when we think about integrating and them into the organization, et cetera. And so I think it's a mix of, business systems and data. And like, this is the tree that's never going to get cut down for the senior living world. Like, these are the key seat in the organization, and it's a really challenging one to fill. And like, the needs of that role change in any given community every year, 2 years, 3 years. And so it's about systematizing your success with tried and true business systems that aren't going to mean that you bat 1,000, but like, it should improve your batting percentage.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard. The point that you make, and I've seen this in real life in a number of senior living communities. Actually, when I was young in my 20s, working for a company that doesn't exist anymore, but I was in the operating side of things. We had an executive director who was so good, and then he just fell apart. And it had to do with the change and ultimately the ownership of the building that changed the culture that got him discouraged. And he ultimately left the company and went to another company and had, I don't know, 20 years more of success before he retired. And so it's not an absolute condemnation. One of the things I wonder about a lot, though, Brett, is I sometimes I think leaders have somebody that they just really, really like, and that liking can cloud their judgment about how good they are. And I also think the converse is true, is that you can have somebody who's actually really good that the leader can't stand, or just doesn't like. How do you deal with those? You have thoughts on those, either both of those situations?
Yeah, we have a business coach we've worked with for a long time, and how he talks about it, and I've adopted this and started evangelizing it with our organization, is like, and this isn't always fun to hear or say, and it's not always popular, but look, we're not a family. We're a team. And that's different. We're a professional sports team, not a family. Like, my love is not unconditional. I may like somebody, like, I may, I really like somebody, but like, you being on the team in this seat is not, due to unconditional love. It's due to a mix of attitude, effort, and performance. And, again, when I talk about business systems, when you apply the business systems and you're true to them, it becomes a lot easier, because you're forcing yourself to do the work, to be consistent, and to rate people and go through a process, a consistent process for everybody to get to, hey, is this the right person for this position on this team today? And I think, oftentimes we view ourselves, frankly, too much like a friend group or a family, and that's not what it is. Like, we're assembling a team within an organization to achieve certain objectives. Run after a big vision, adhere to core values, etc. And those are things that, those are activities that require a lot of, consensus and skill sets. And like the liking thing is important as a part of overall culture. Like, a team should like to work together. That doesn't mean that there's not vigorous debate and conflict and challenging. It should be healthy. But like, we're here to achieve something, and as a professional team, not as a friend group or a family. And like, that's a really important distinction that I think it's really easy to miss. We've certainly missed it. I've missed it. And it's just, again, like, that's one of those challenges in business that every leader who ever existed faces it, and every leader who will ever exist will face it. And you just got to keep working at it and doing your best to systematize your world, so you can prevent yourself from making some of the mistakes that you're going to regret later on.
Yeah, I think I kind of think we need to circle back and maybe do a whole show on this whole idea of niceness. I was listening to an Adam Grant podcast yesterday, and it was actually about trash talking, mostly in sports, but in business. And he was sort of making the case that healthy trash talking actually makes people better. And so I got to thinking about it, and I think that maybe internally in buildings we need to need more competition, right? So we all play nice, And I see companies that are going, yeah, I guess I'm at average. That's okay. And when you kind of think about it, what would it be like if 80% of the senior living operators out there looked around and they looked at an operator and said, I'm going to beat their occupancy. I'm going to beat their staff retention rate. I'm going to beat their length of stay. I think that competitiveness, and we've seen this in the Olympics in just the last couple of days, we've had two tennis players who got all upset because of sort of niceness issues, and maybe nice is overrated. I don't know.
Yeah. I like it. It's I think like we should all approach everything we're doing with, compassion and empathy, etc. But you can be compassionate and empathetic and, ruthlessly focused on a particular pursuit or vision. I think some people are motivated by competition. Certainly it inspires some excitement for me, but
Yep.
I would say like for me, it's not about like beating it, other HR outsourcing providers. Like I honestly couldn't care. Like more the merrier. Come into our market. I don't really give a shit. My belief is like what we're running after is we want to transform the industry, and that's our rallying cry. And frankly, at least at Procare, I think competition helps us do that. I think it makes us sharper. So I think competition can be a good thing. But that's not really that's not what motivates our team is like, hey, we want to beat these
Yep.
other guys. Our organization is about like, hey, we're laser focused on being able to leverage people, the people function to change quality of care, financial outcomes or financial performance, resident satisfaction, growth, scalability, et cetera. So like every organization is different, and every leader has to figure out like what is it that gets them excited? How are they going to then inspire their team? And sometimes it's exactly what you said, like, hey, we're doing really well. We've got a great competitor next to us. Let's rally around beating that competitor. And for other organizations, it's like we've got this really special mission and vision, and we got to rally everybody behind it. And like, if we have a competitor, we have a competitor. We don't really care. Like that's not in our viewpoint or our lens. So I do agree with you. I think the balance is like you don't want to have a bunch of people that are assholes all the time, but I do think you want to have a lot of candor and an acknowledgement that again, like this is a profession, or business and organizations are professional sports teams. They're not friend groups. They're not families, etc.
Yeah, and I would certainly say that there are times where you can have somebody who's really really good at their job, but just miserable to get along with, and that generally speaking, that's never worth it. That because you do have to, you have people have to like going to work every day, and everybody's got to like going to work every day. So do you have any so as I think about our audience here, and they're thinking, okay, give me 1, 2 solid takeaways I can do in the next, I don't know, day, 30 days, 60 days to improve my talent density. I love that term. I hadn't heard that term before, so I really like that. Do you have any thoughts on what would you do? What would be a thing that somebody could do to actually improve their talent density?
I would say like in short order, it's putting a talent review process in place. So like, again, one I'm particularly a fan of is, or maybe I'll talk about in our organization. So in our organization, our leadership team gets together every quarter. We do a talent review, and our goal is to have 80% of 80% of key seats are filled with A players. And so and that's a process like somebody can start tomorrow, and we get all of our leaders together and they have it out over, where we're at as far as all the members of their team on talent. So like, and then, and looking at challenging each other for how are we developing our people, what are the things that they need to work on, et cetera. So like I really believe that really solid talent review process is something that's like, it takes effort and focus to implement it, but it can be implemented really quickly. Like EOS as an example, they have they have their people analyzers, what they call it, and it goes through, core values fit. Do you what is it? Do you get it? Do you want it? Can't remember the third, but like EOS has a good one. Scaling Up, I think, has a more robust one. But like that's something you can do immediately. And you just, I always I would suggest you start at the executive level and do it with next layer down. And then enculturate the next group and your management philosophy, which is we're going to do talent reviews. And then you go to, bring it down to the next group and the next group and the next group. And, over a quarter, maybe not a quarter, but over, a number of quarters, suddenly like this is just part of our business system. Like every quarter, the various teams get together and they do talent reviews, and that tells us, where our team is at, how they're performing as each individual, and gives us accountability and a map for getting the wrong people off the bus and improving folks that are C players. It could be Bs, or Bs it could be As. Really holding the leaders accountable to taking the action steps to make those movements. And then also the folks that are A players, how do we make sure we retain them? Because we give them big, hairy projects and goals that they're excited about. How do we continue to develop them, et cetera? So I really think having a formal talent review process or implementing a formal talent review process goes a really long way.
Cool. I love that. And you've inspired a whole bunch. So I want you to hold on for a couple of minutes after we're off. We're about out of time. Hold on for a couple of minutes. I got a couple of great ideas that you've inspired me to think about. We should talk about before you go away. With that, thank you so much, Brett. This has been amazing. I've learned a ton. I love what you guys are doing to improve the lives of people who live and work in senior living. And I can hardly wait till the next time we do this. So thank you very much for watching. And I guess we'll see you again on Friday for Foresight TV.